I'm Yankov Wong.
And I'm David Bicho.
We're here to share about 6 of the greatest confusion of
lighting.
Confusion number 1, power of light. So, what about it?
Yes, the power of the light. There's a really big misconception about the power of light, that people think that if you have more or less power, that the quality and the behavior of light will differ. That you will have different behaviors when you have much power of the light and when you have little power of the light. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that when you have a lot of power of light, people think that the light will wrap around more and it will bounce around more and create more highlights and harder shadows. And the opposite, when you have really little light, it won't reach all the way and such stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But that isn't true. The power of the light the behavior of the light doesn't change just because you have more or less light. That is really important. And I think that misconception must be cleared out.
Yeah, and the only thing which the power output of the light is affecting is the brightness and the exposure, so that you can actually control it within your camera. And if you are in a controlled environment, and if the light is positioned at the same spot using the same modifier, no matter what you do to the output of it, it will actually look the same as long as the exposure is the same.
Exactly, because the power of the light is actually just a relative thing, relatively to the camera, or to our, the iris of the eye and so on. But the light itself doesn't behave in any other way. So it is relative to the camera, the exposure of the camera. Really important, really important.
So that is number 1. Confusion number 2, output angle. So what's the confusion?
The confusion is that people get confused by that this angle out of the light will create this beautiful patch of light, this coverage, this pattern of light, and it looks really soft. Mm-hmm. And that softness, people think that when this looks soft, they will have a soft light. That is a really big confusion. Look at my shadow now. My shadow is really, really hard. It's
pretty hard, I would say.
Really hard. And that is because the light source, the shape of the light source is relatively small.
Yep.
That is what's controlling the hardness of the shadow. And if I back up and let's just look at this coverage of light, it looks really soft. So this part has nothing to do with the hardness or softness. Mm-hmm. And this part is created by the light angle out of it. The more light angle you will have, the bigger the stamp of light, the bigger the light pattern, and the softer the light pattern will be. But that has nothing to do with the actual result.
Though the coverage is not affecting the hardness or softness, so-called, of the light, but it's going to affect the contrast of how everything is going to look, right?
Very good point. Because the bigger this will be, the bigger you will hit the floor, the ceiling and the walls, which in turn will brighten up the shadows, which you will have a lesser contrast, a lower contrast. So that confusion is now cleared out.
Yep. Number 3, contrast versus softness.
Contrast versus softness, that is a confusion that is really common out there. People think that these two things belong together, that they are really related to each other. And they actually aren't at all. Contrast and softness is 2 totally different parameters that you can control independently.
Exactly. And some of my students always got this confusion. They think that, I use the term effective size, because if you have a softbox and you move it closer to the subject, it will look bigger, so that when the light source is bigger, the light is softer. But at the end, they don't get what they want, because they think when it is softer, you have lower contrast. But the result is when you get closer, you actually got higher contrast.
Thanks to the inverse square law.
Exactly.
Because the light out from this light source, when the light source is closer, the walls and the ceiling and the floor will be relatively longer away from the model or Mr. Ken in this case, which will fill in the shadows lesser. Hence, the higher contrast.
Exactly.
So contrast and softness is 2 totally different things. If you want less contrast or more contrast, that is by using fill light. That is one separate thing. And the softness is relative, or how do you say it?
The effective size.
Effective size of the light source. If you want to have a softer light, you need a bigger light source.
Number 4, filling shadows. So what's the problem of filling shadows?
I see people fill shadows in a way that makes me feel angry is just a light word.
Angry.
Yes. Actually, can I borrow this one?
Yes, please.
I see people filling shadows like this, from below.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
You see it already recovered up.
Yeah.
Because when you are, if I let this go, if you hold this, when we have it from this position straight up under the nose, it will look like you're doing a scary light. It will look super unnatural. It will look like, can I use the word shit?
Yes, why not?
It will look shit, okay? So when you're reflecting, especially with a silver reflector like this, you will have a small light source on this reflector, which will create hard light from below, which is the same as creating a scary light, which is the same as enhancing all the ugly parts of a face, to be frank. So the trick is to actually do something like this from the side, because you want the shadow, the nose under the shadow, to be the darkest shadow. And you can fill the shadow on the side by using the reflector from the side. And it's also really important how far or back you are. If you are really much from the front, or if you are further away, you can have the filling weaker, and it will of course be smaller, which can create new shadows. So it's really important to look how it looks. But what I also want to point out is, if you have the reflector from the back or from the front, I mean this,
it actually looks different.
Very different, because you can actually have the fill light have a certain direction to it, and often you do not want a direction to the fill light. You want the fill light to just
look natural,
and just be there without taking any attention from the subject. So that often is to come as much forward as you can to have your fill light coming from the front. So not from below, preferably more from the front, so the shadows that are going backwards will still go into shadow. Then it will be as invisible as possible, if that is what you were looking for.
Number 5, the material of the modifier. So, how does the material of the modifier affect the light?
Yes. Can I feel it?
Yes, please.
It's really hard. This is metal.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really common confusion, that the material of the modifier actually reflects on your subject that you are using the light for. So, in this case, I think people think that, oh, this is a shiny metal thing, I will get a shiny metal result. And that is the confusion. They are so confused about that, because that doesn't happen. The material of the modifier affects the normal 3 things that all modifiers does. It changes the angle the light will leave the modifier. It changes the shape of the modifier, and maybe the color.
Yeah.
But it's only 3 things that the modifiers do. So the material doesn't affect how the
no matter how hard, how soft it is.
Doesn't matter, exactly. Let's look at the softbox, for example. Soft, you can almost use this in your bed because it's so soft. And then maybe you think that you will have a soft light, just because this feels soft. But this has actually nothing to do with it, because the softness comes out of the shape of the modifier. It's a big modifier. And actually, this modifier, the light out from the modifier will create a really big coverage, a really big light pattern that also will help filling the shadows.
Exactly.
So the feeling of a soft light is created by the size of it. If this somehow was made in metal and had the same coverage, you would have the same effect. So the feeling of the material that is not why a light is as it is.
Confusion number 6 is the material of diffusion. So, how is that affecting what we normally do?
Okay, diffusion material, I often see people use this on reflectors, like a normal reflector or a magnum reflector or whatever. You put it in front to receive a softer light.
Yes.
Exactly. And what is happening when you put a diffusion on is that you will change the coverage of the light. So the light will hit the floors and the ceiling and the walls even more, which in terms then will brighten up the shadows. Fine, perfectly. But I often see people use multiple layers of diffusion, and that actually won't do anything to the softness. Since all you do is still the same thing, you're changing the coverage of the light, and you will steal energy when you do this.
Exactly.
So your flashes will become weaker. And maybe that is the point they want to do. I don't know, but I know that people say...
Well, sometimes does that.
Exactly, but I think that mostly people do this because they think they're going to get even softer light.
Yeah. Like, I remember that you did a demonstration of using like a pro hat or something, and you put diffusion in front of it, and to demonstrate one thing, which is, now, like what we said before, putting diffusion in front of it is not going to affect the size and the shape of it, but by putting a diffusion in front of the pro hat with a zoom reflector, it's going to diffuse everything inside so that it wouldn't be two light source, you know, because this is one light source, but when light is hitting the reflector, actually it's creating a different light source, and eventually sometimes you see different shadows on the subject.
You get multiple shadows.
Yeah.
And when you do this, you will only get one light source. In other words, you will only get one shadow, one soft shadow. So this is really, really great. And this is actually a good example. We do like this, and then we start to double it up like that. The size of the light source is still the same. In other words, it will be the same softness. The shadows will be the same, but you will just have less power.
Yeah. So if you really want to make it go softer, what you should do is probably use a bigger diffuser and pull it away so that this new bigger diffuser would actually create a bigger light source to make the light softer.
Exactly.
So to conclude, everything that we talked about just now affects the quality of light.
The quality of light?
Yeah.
What is the quality of light?
The quality of light. I don't know. Honestly, I've been confused by this term, quality of light, for quite a long time. Because when I was younger, whenever people are talking about quality of light, they always refer it to the softness of light. But nowadays, when people are talking about the quality of light, they are sometimes, not always, they are referring to maybe the CLI of it, like the color of it. So it depends on who and how and when are we talking about it.
Exactly, but I don't think that people actually are aware of that they may be talking about totally different things.
Exactly.
So this can be a really big confusion. The term quality of light, be careful using that, I would say.
So if you are serious about learning about lighting, the only thing that we would recommend is really look, watch, feel, discover. You need to find a way that you understand it so that it's, like what you said, in your spine. Instead of just letting people telling you, oh, this is a good light source, oh, this is a good modifier, just use it.
Exactly. So, to conclude, let's skip the word quality of light and instead incorporate the word observe, learn, exactly as you said.
Thank you very much. So that's the end. I thank you again, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here with us and share with us your knowledge or your knowledge with
big honor to be here.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, guys. See you.